All right. So my number three is The Proposal from 2009. Quick log line. A pushy boss forces her young assistant to marry her in order to keep her visa status in the US and avoid deportation to Canada. Directed by Anne Fletcher, starring Sandra Bullock, Ryan Reynolds, Mary Steenburgen, and Betty White. So I put this movie on my list obviously for Betty White. And there's something about the Betty White persona in general, but specifically through this movie that really reminds me of my grandmother on my dad's side.
Uh-huh.
And what it symbolizes to me is somebody who's obviously very loving, very adoring towards, her grandchild, but just people around them in general, but is also kind of quirky and has like a twinkle and tongue in cheek sort of thing. Because often grandparents can, at least like you were saying, right, from the point of view of a child, can be like, oh, you're just old people.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get to see that at all with my grandparents because they felt like fully formed people with quirks and personalities. And you see that with Betty White in this movie, that yeah, she's doing sort of what I feel like the expected grandparental behavior of that, I love my grandchild, I will do anything and for them and go over. In fact, for me, it was always over the top, right? Over and beyond what my parents did for me and my sister, my grandparents would do for us when we showed up. Like, we would eat whatever and, ice creams galore and our favorite foods and watching TV till like 2 a.m. in the morning and what have you, all this would all rules were off essentially. That's how we would have fun and play board games and
Yeah.
all sorts of things. And so she has that, Betty White, in the movie, but then she also has a bit of a mischief towards
Definitely.
her that she knows. And that's the thing, right? Like grandparents are knowing of life and humanity, but also very knowing of the family. They
Mm-hmm.
can very easily suss out that, okay, the thing that's going to break this family in this movie is the relationship between her son and the grandchild, so Ryan Reynolds and his father.
Mm-hmm.
And she knows that I need to sort of do something dramatic, which she does to kind of break that tension. So that's sort of a big thing that she does. And then also, I think grandparents have this innate quality to see other people because they've just lived a longer life. They have experience. So even when Sandra Bullock's character is, cold and standoffish, and obviously she's manipulating, the grandchild
Right.
into marriage.
Right.
But I think Betty White can see the love between them and the heart that Sandra Bullock's character has, inside the tough exterior. She sees that
Mm-hmm.
very first, and she's willing to kind of give her a shot and, welcome her with open arms. And to me, that's exactly what my grandmother would do, that she would give people the kindness and the benefit of the doubt, even if they were prickly and unlikable. And we were sort of like, oh, who's this like random relative who's shown up at our place at 3 p.m. in the afternoon? Like, get him out.
Yeah.
No, she would be taking care of them. And ultimately, we would all say, oh, actually, we learned something from this person, even though this person seemed very annoying in the beginning. So, I always remember that, like, you got to give people their fair share and treat them with kindness because you never know, So yeah, to me, Betty White captures that. And she's just not, an old lady in the corner,
Right.
as the world might view. Like she has a lot of chutzpah and, all of that to her. But yeah, curious if you'd watched this movie before.
I had not seen this.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I had not seen this. I in the podcast, of listeners have listened for a while, they know I not at all a fan of like Julia Roberts. I think I even talked at one point too about, like Ryan. I'm not like the romantic comedy
Mm.
stars, the leading women of the 90s never really did it for me, except for Sandra Bullock. I was a huge fan of. Something about the way that she
Yeah.
works in these films just always have been like, oh, Sandra Bullock's fantastic, and
Yeah.
I'm still a big fan of hers. I just had never seen this movie for some reason, and it was a high concept comedy, where in the first 10
Right.
minutes the entire plot is spelled out. You know exactly what what it is going in. You watch the
Yeah.
poster and you see, okay, well, it's like a sham marriage because of a green card issue that Sandra
Right.
Bullock's running into because she's Canadian and has to marry her assistant. So that I like the premise. And I thought it was she carries the movie for sure. I felt
Oh,
Sandra
yeah.
Bullock did. Just great performance. Ryan Reynolds, who's an actor who I can like sometimes for sure. I just didn't think they had a lot of chemistry together, and I didn't really buy when the moment comes where they actually have to sell the fact that they're really in love and this is like a real thing to me. I'm just like, I don't really see this working. It still feels, artificial because again, I just don't really buy them together. But getting to the Betty White piece, she has, for listeners who might not be as familiar with Betty White, or especially maybe outside of the United States, I don't know how well her persona kind of travels internationally, but this movie does a very good job of capturing the personality and the presence of who Betty White represented, especially in the end of her career. Like, I actually first saw her when I was a huge fan of the Mary Tyler Moore Show as a kid and would watch that show, all the time. And she was on that playing sort of like a ditzy character in her younger career. So that's where I first knew Betty White, but definitely in the last, decades of her life, she was known as this precocious, older woman who has like a little firecracker. She's got her own personality. She's not just going to be that old lady in the corner. I think this movie does a very good job of showcasing her persona in that way, because she is this character. And I don't really think another actor at the time could have pulled something like this off, or it would have been believable. Of like, this woman would come across as annoying potentially with the wrong actor doing this performance, or just sort of like dragging the movie down. But I think that she is the perfect casting for what this movie needs in that role. And it almost feels
the
movie
like, in my mind, I think.
Yeah, it almost feels like they gave her more screen time than maybe the character on paper had. Like, maybe the script, this character wasn't as involved in the story, and then once they got Betty White, they're like, okay, well, now we want to expand what this role is, because we need her in the movie more, which is not a bad thing. But that's sort of what I felt like. They took a character who didn't really need to be this involved and made her involved because of the persona of Betty White and sort of who she represents as an older lady, which is cool that you had a grandparent who was like this, because Betty White's pretty cool. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it's funny because me and my boyfriend, we were watching The Golden Girls lately, and Betty White is in it, and there Betty White is sort of, the not so sharp, slightly ditzy, but still very adorable and kind-hearted person, which to me is kind of a shocker, because my introduction to Betty White is the Proposal version, which is like you said, the precocious, and like we've been talking. So it's been interesting to kind of go back and see her persona. But yeah, I agree on the movie. Like, when I first watched it, it was like a fun romp. I enjoyed it, but I rewatched it since, and there are definitely some really fun and funny moments, but overall the movie is okay.
Yeah.
Like, I think to me, if this movie, not to critique too much, had like a tighter direction, like, it definitely drags quite a bit here and there. And I think you need, for like a high concept movie, for it to kind of really move at a pace. And then Ryan Reynolds, I think we share that same opinion. Like, he's a hit or miss for me. I think he's good in the back and forth scenes before they start to fall in love.
Agreed. Yes.
Like that, because this is Ryan Reynolds' brand, right? Like, tongue-in-cheek, sort of, kind of funny, and giving the other person shit, but also taking shit. This is what he does always in some form or the other. But then when he has to get earnest and serious, that transition just doesn't quite really happen in a big way. Or if it does, it feels kind of on the nose. And so you don't really buy the love. In fact, I buy their love through Betty White's eyes, that as a grandma, I'm seeing these two together, and the fact that this slightly maturer woman would be good for my grandchild, who's sort of, been doing whatever he's been doing, in his life. So I see that point of view more clearly without Betty White even spelling that out. It's just in the performance, versus I don't see that love from Ryan Reynolds' eyes towards Sandra Bullock.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think I mentioned earlier in my thoughts that I didn't think that Sandra Bullock and Ryan Reynolds had chemistry. They definitely don't have romantic chemistry, but I did think that his Girl Friday kind of snappy dialogue back and forth was great. I liked the first 20 minutes of the movie when he's basically just being in scenes where he's her executive assistant, and she's the boss, and that dynamic was funny, and I think they played off one another really well in terms of that. It's just when the movie progressed, they needed to get more romantic in the third act, it just that part it didn't work for me, and I think it was due to him, not her.
Yeah, not her for
Sandra
sure.
Bullock's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, she's great. She has this kind of acidic yet earnest quality to her that helps balance these rom-coms, right? Because they can be quite corny and cheesy, but she kind of cuts through them and shows up and puts in the work. She's not like sleepwalking through these movies, but yet makes it look really effortless, which is why I agree. Like, she's definitely in my pantheon of 90s sort of rom-com stars. The other thing I would say is the Alaska setting is wonderful. Like, I've never been to Alaska. I've never seen a movie set in Alaska before. Even though I think it's shot in Massachusetts. But
I was gonna say this is not Alaska.
I know, but just calling something Alaska and setting a movie over there and a different kind of life, and their house, the lodge house and such. Like, it's a new thing for a movie to be focused on. So I don't know. When I first watched it, I was definitely charmed by that.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting because usually these movies, like romantic comedies, where they want an exotic setting, it's because the actors just want a free vacation to X country, which is like Adam Sandler's entire career in the last 20 years. Right. So I'm like, why set it in Alaska if they're not going to get to go to Alaska? And maybe because I'm from Massachusetts, the place looked so much like Massachusetts. It did it. And there were several scenes where I'm like, oh, that mountain is so green screened in, and it's so obvious because they're running around in this town, which is from, like the North Shore or something. And it's just like, it does not look like Alaska. Not that I've been to Alaska, but it looks so much like Massachusetts to me. I was like, this is ridiculous. Why did they even do this? I guess to make the family more exotic, or to also give the movie a larger scope instead of, oh, they're going to like, a small town in Mass or New Hampshire or something. That I just was so odd. The other thing I'll just point out too that I thought was so bizarre was that entire, I think you know what I'm going to say, that right. Indian dance scene was the weirdest thing I've ever seen in a movie. It wasn't funny like at all. And it was like, what is going on here? So there's a scene where Betty White's character is supposed to be part Native American for some reason. I guess they did that so they could do this scene and have it not be racist or something. But she does this like Indian love dance, and then Sandra Bullock kind of comes into it like, none of this is working. And it was bizarre to see these two great on-screen comedians be like anti-funny in an entire sequence. It's like 6 minutes long. I'm like, what is this? Like, whose idea was this? Who thought this worked? But clearly someone did, because I remember this was in the trailers. They showed moments of this. This must have tested well in test screen audiences. We got to extend the Indian dance sequence because people love seeing Betty White like jumping around a fire talking about what that was. The most bizarre thing I've seen in a mainstream movie in a long time.
It's just so broad and just weird and
so weird.
But I can see, sort of people kind of losing their shit in the theater, just like laughing like crazy. And I've always been like, what's happening?
It's like, this is weird.
They could have done anything else, because to me, it's a pretty pivotal moment for Ryan Reynolds to sort of see Sandra Bullock like let loose.
Exactly.
And for Sandra Bullock to also feel comfortable enough to, give herself a little bit of an out, and also bond with Betty White. And I think it's a lot to say. It says a lot about like what Betty White has done to make Sandra Bullock feel more comfortable and open up and things like that. So it's a pretty important moment. I think things shift totally after this. They could have done anything else.
Right.
It didn't have to be this at all.
No, it just did not. And I mean, I hate to, again, blame not Ryan Reynolds, sorry, Betty White and Sandra Bullock, two people that I think are great and actually work well in this film. But I just like, they can't pull this off in a way that, I don't know, like they couldn't find the humor in this in the right way. It was just super bizarre, though. You're right. It's necessary in the script for this moment to happen. Yeah. And I saw the mechanics of what they were trying to do in the terms of in the narrative. And you do need this moment, but like, why pick this? And not only with the oddly racist sort of undertones of like, why is a white woman like pretending to be a Native American? Like, just make it be anything else. Like, couldn't she have like a German heritage? She's in lederhosen or something. Like, it was just it was very it was very weird. Yeah, maybe you want to go to Massachusetts for sure. Go back and vacation there. But, Sandra Bullock's great. I just want to make sure that people know my thoughts on her. She's fantastic. Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.